Right, the debt ceiling fight causing plenty of division in Washington this week. Did the GOP just set a big trap for Democrats who seem more divided than ever? Let's bring in our economic panel with the Vice President of the Commonwealth Foundation and fellow at Independent Women's Forum, Jennifer Stefano, the former chief economist under President Trump with the National Economic Council, Joe Livornia, business and market analyst and Newsmax contributor, Seth Denson, and, of course, the founder of Allison May PR and my co-host, Allison Maloney. Okay, folks, it was a big week. Lots of jockeying for position and moving around with respect to the debt ceiling and whether or not this bill survives. Jennifer, isn't it the case that sometimes in Washington there are no good options? And can we make the case that raising the debt ceiling at this point was just the best of a number of bad options for the GOP?
Yeah, well, I think the Republicans are doing what we Sicilians call never murdering someone in the process of committing suicide. The Democratic Party is in chaos. The radical left wing of the party has a chokehold on it, and they are struggling to figure out a path forward. Their president, President Biden, is underwater in his approval ratings. The Republicans are for once using a strategy of just let that play out. And I think that increase in the debt ceiling, while never good, never good, is part of that strategy.
Now, I know former President Trump was critical of the move to raise the debt ceiling. But Allison, to Jennifer's point, from a messaging and communication standpoint, doesn't it make sense to keep the focus on that $5 trillion welfare expansion, the tax increases, and the division in the party, which President Biden hasn't been able to do anything about?
No, he hasn't. And look, there's crisis after crisis for the Democratic Party. So you have this bill that they're trying to get it passed, but we've got Democrats to say, forget it, we're not doing this. And now you have this debt ceiling. So they figured, all right, let's focus on this. We hopefully can get this passed. But, you know, McConnell said to President Biden in a letter the other day, look, we helped you out now, but come December, you're on your own. We're not going to help you out. And so they needed to get through this, and now they can focus on this infrastructure bill and the social bill. But it just comes down to what's going to happen. You know, this is a Band-Aid, really. And right. they have a PR and crisis nightmare because they can't get people within their own party to agree.
And in the next block, we're actually going to talk about some of the stuff that's in this gigantic bill. But Seth, I want to come to you next. You know, we just had the worst September in the markets in a decade. The jobs numbers announced yesterday missed expectations. What would have been worse for the market? Just talking about the debt ceiling, a government shutdown or a continuation of this spending debate?
Yeah, you know, Tom, that's a great question because I think a lot of people confuse the two, but there's no question that not expanding the debt ceiling would have been just tragic for the markets, for the U.S. economy. Understand the debt ceiling is really there for government money that's already been committed. In other words, that money's already been spent. So if we didn't raise the debt ceiling, we would have now been in default of money we've already committed to. Shutting down the government, I would argue some people might say that's not the worst idea in the world for maybe a week or two. Save a little bit of that cash. But no, that would have been bad too. But nonetheless, the worst thing would have been not extending that. But here's an important point, though, and I think it's really important here. We raised it almost $500 billion, and that only buys us 2 months.
Yeah.
Boy, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, it gives you a sense of the depth of the problem, the overall problem. Joe, real quickly to you, the president's numbers are in the 30s. That was big news this week. The infighting within the Democratic Party between the socialists and whatever moderates are left rages on. How do you think this plays out this week? Do you think we're going to see any progress there?
No, I'm not. I don't believe so. I mean, this thing with the bill, Tom, is going to take a bunch of weeks, if not a couple of months. I personally don't like the fact that McConnell gave the 2-month extension because the Democrats knew all along that Joe Manchin wasn't going along with what was being proposed from the memo that was leaked a few weeks ago. So all we've basically done is give the Democrats 2 extra months to put a reconciliation bill through. So I don't think that was good policy, and we're going to see it's going to take a while to get these details hammered out. But unfortunately, I think we're going to likely see something that's not going to be good policy. So we'll wait and see how it plays out, but my guess is they're going to get something ultimately through on the reconciliation side.
All right, I want to thank our panel. We're going to continue the discussion of this right after the break. And welcome back to Wake Up America Weekend. I'm Tom Basili. Let's continue our discussion of the latest over the Biden-Sanders spending spree with our economic panel for the morning. The Vice President of the Commonwealth Foundation and a fellow at the Independent Women's Forum, Jennifer Stefano. Former chief economist under President Trump with the National Economic Council, Joseph Livornia. Business and markets analyst and Newsmax contributor, Seth Denson. And the founder of Allison May PR and my co-host, Allison Maloney. Joe, I want to pick up on something that you were just talking about reconciliation. West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin slammed his own leader, Chuck Schumer, following the debt ceiling debate. You can see him reacting to Schumer hitting back at Republicans. Senator came out and said civility is gone. Take a listen.
I didn't think it was appropriate at this time. We had talked about that, but he felt charged up, and he and I have good conversations.
Why was not appropriate?
I just think that basically what we got to do is find the pathway forward to make sure that we de-weaponize. Mm-hmm. We have to de-weaponize. You can't be playing politics. None of us can, on both sides, okay? Mm-hmm. And both sides have been very guilty of this, and the frustration was built up. And I'm sure Chuck's frustration was built up, but that was not a way to take it out.
So he says, Joe, civility is gone. He actually got up and walked out in the middle of Schumer's address in full view of the cameras. It doesn't seem like Biden or Schumer are really working to get him or Sinema on board at this point. If they are going to do something from a reconciliation standpoint, how does that make any sense?
This, I look at this as being a high stakes politics. Certainly, the senator had said it would be the reconciliation. He thought $1 trillion to 1.5, and there was some talk that he might go a little bit above 1.5. I can't give you an exact answer, Tom, other than the fact that these things tend to play out in unusual ways with a lot of twists and turns. These are very good poker players, if you will. I mean, they're politicians, so they're pretty sophisticated with this kind of stuff. And my guess is at some point they will probably find agreement on a reconciliation bill, and the cost may look a lot less only because we're not going to score it over a 10-year period. We may just score it over a 4 or 5 year period. So
right.
We'll see how it plays out.
Jennifer, to Joe's point, by the way, this is the bill. If we can get a shot of the entire, that's the bill. We have it on the desk here. I love my props. You guys know that. Nobody seems to be budging on many of these provisions of the bill. Democrats still seem very committed to it. If you're Republican, how do you handle issues that might be popular, for instance, with women voters, like paid leave or the child care aspects of this? I think that's one of the big challenges for the GOP going into the next couple of months of debate on this.
Yeah, I think it's wrong to suggest that women simply just want paid leave or the government to be their sugar daddy. I think there is an appeal to be made that these programs cost money. And the number one question Republicans should be asking Americans is this: if we pass this Democratic bill, how much of your disposable income are you ready to give to the government? You clearly have too much. The Democrats think you have too much money that you're taking home from the paycheck. They think they need it in government. And also, oh, by the way, a lot of this money is going to places like big tech company to expand internet, right? You have billions of dollars going to big tech. Mm-hmm. And I think from that perspective, you can win over women and other constituency groups. I just think it's wrong to suggest that all women generally are going to love that, because there's no counter argument of the costs.
There's so much stuff that's in this. There's something called tree equity, and it's like $1 billion for Allison, what is tree equity to begin with?
We talked about this morning. I had to go look it up because I'm like, what is in this? So it's $3 billion, Tom, to plant trees, and the idea is that there should be enough trees in specific neighborhoods for everyone to experience the health, economic, civilian benefits that trees provide.
And there's also the Civilian Climate, Civilian Climate Corps, billions of dollars for that.
$7.5 billion. And basically, this Corps is tasked with carrying out conservation projects. They didn't explain what they were. $7.5 billion. for that.
Does it surprise you that a lot of this, that none of this stuff really has fallen off the table yet?
Well, no, it doesn't surprise me, but nobody's really talking about it. We're talking about it, but if you turn on other media outlets, they're not talking about it. They're talking about paid leave. They're talking about how this helps women. I love Jennifer's analogy. We don't want the government to be our sugar daddy. I think that's a great point, right? But a lot of the Democrats think that women and that people want all of this free stuff, but there's a cost with that. That's why people from other countries want to come here, because of the taxes that they pay, because of the health care that they get.
Yeah, and we're one of the only networks that's actually talking about the 40 tax increases that's in this massive bill. Seth, to you, we've talked in the previous panel about uncertainty and how that impacts the markets and the economy. The president came out this week. He wants to continue to blame everything that's wrong on the unvaccinated, everything that's wrong with the economy. But how much of what we've seen in terms of the inflation, in terms of the lackluster job numbers, 184,000 people left the workforce in September, only 194,000 jobs created. How much of that is directly related to uncertainty about the tax hikes that are in this bill?
Well, I think there's a lot there, right, on the tax hikes, but this is just government monetary policy in general. I think that is creating the overall situation. Listen, the markets are still reacting somewhat, or I should say relatively positive. The markets, I think, though, are overly inflated based on a recognition that the government's never going to let anything fail. This isn't true capitalism anymore. There's no ups and real downs anymore. There's a safety net because no politician wants the market to drop on their own watch, and that's going to create a long-term instability that I don't know that can be overcome.
All right, and I've been calling this universal basic income light for a long time. All right, thank you, panel. We appreciate it, and we'll be right back.